Welcome to Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. It's a weekly show that goes out over YouTube and as a podcast over all of the major channels. And each week I get to sit with an inspiring person and listen to them tell their story and share it with all of you. This week is no different. I'm very, very lucky and pleased to be joined by Ash Atalla. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I thought you were going to say this week an inspiring person was not available. But here's Ash Atalla.
Absolutely the opposite, and the comedy starts immediately off the bat. I'll give the customary introduction for Ash, who's got an incredibly impressive track record. Ash is the MD of Roughcut Productions, TV and film production company. Ash is a producer and a writer as well. Has won an Emmy Award, a Golden Globe, 5 BAFTAs. Probably best known for his work with The Office, with Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant and others, but subsequently has followed that with an absolute roller coaster of hits, including the IT Crowd, Cuckoo, People Just Do Nothing, Corrupt FM, People Just Do Nothing, and the latest Stathlets Flats. I have to say that really carefully. It's quite hard to say.
Stathlets Flats, yeah.
You can say it fast.
Channel 4 said, don't call it that. Nobody can get their tongue around it. And they were right.
Yeah, and you called it that anyway.
Yeah, thanks. You're right, let's do it.
Well, Stathlets Flats is worth a mention because it's just been, it's been nominated for 2 BAFTAs,
yes,
right?
Yeah, it's our sort of latest show. Yeah.
Amazing. Ash and his company produce for basically all of the big British public service broadcasters, BBC, Channel 4, ITV, etc. Also in the US, HBO and Amazon and many others. Born in Cairo, grew up in the UK, in various different parts of the UK. If we're lucky, we might hear a few accents coming out there. Mm-hmm. Studied business and finance at the University of Bath and started out actually in business before falling into the TV world, and we'll talk about that. Went on to be the head of comedy at Talkback Thames, which is part of the Fremantle Media empire, and has really been in comedy, I guess, all of your professional career in TV and film. We'll talk about the latest project, which is super interesting and coming out soon, and I'll keep that a surprise for now. What an amazing track record.
It's been a busy time.
Hellishly busy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those businesses that you just, well, I'm sure you know, you're not allowed to rest in anything. And I think in TV, and I mean, you really can fall off the radar pretty quickly.
Yeah. And
come back on the radar pretty quickly. So that
got to keep moving, got to keep innovating.
Yeah, I think that CV is a result of like a restlessness that is absolutely required to sort of stay around.
Well, the first piece of restlessness, and you know, it's a notable thing. You were in business and finance, you know, at University of Bath, and then you were I think a stockbroker or currency trader.
Yeah.
And of course, as you do after that, you get into TV. How did that happen?
It's funny. It's a real sort of lesson to me, and you know, now that I'm a father, in terms of like encouraging your kids to do something and then not sort of sense checking it and fact checking it, which I don't think I really did for myself, but I always sort of assumed that I would have a job in business just because I was interested in it. When I was growing up, it was just when the stock market became kind of deregulated. So in the 80s in England, all those kind of people in stripy shirts shouting into telephones, driving Porsches, everyone kind of going, yeah, you know, my window cleaner won't come round next week because he got a job in the city and he's now a millionaire, and you know, you'd see all these kind of guys, and I thought, well, I can shout and I can hold a phone, and I honestly, I really didn't kind of interrogate it much more than that.
Yeah.
So I kind of built my sort of education into becoming a stockbroker and a currency trader, with the one black spot, which is I'm not that great at math. I'm just not.
Okay. Which might be a problem if you're currency trading and stockbroking,
It's
right?
a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
So how did that work out?
Well, it didn't. I mean, I got so far on sort of on my own goodwill and my own self-confidence, and I got sort of, I did a business degree, but I think the writing was on the wall, because within my business degree, my modules were all like marketing, business psychology, advertising, not accountancy, trading and kind of that stuff. So I was taking like the soft business modules where I was pretty good because they're words essentially. But you know, when you sort of meet the stock market, you know, I got a graduate trainee job in the city, and I managed to pass the first sets of exams because they were, you know, again softly. But you know, when you meet that stuff, it's numbers.
It's hardcore.
It's hardcore and it's pacey.
Yeah.
And you're sitting on desks with, you know, boys and girls who are super bright at maths.
Yeah.
You know,
doing numbers in their heads and trading and calculating.
That is their thing,
Yeah.
and that is what the job is. And so you sort of very quickly go, oh, right, shit, I'm not, you know, I'm hanging in there. So I did it for a couple of years, and the only solace I sort of take from it was I clocked it. I was sort of being able to, and it was a strange moment because
you clocked that it wasn't your thing, and
yeah. And not only was it not for me, I wasn't for them. You know, again, it's a ruthless world, and I had really good personal relationships, but just it was like in a relationship with a man or a woman, and you look at each other and kind of go, we're just not quite right for each other.
Right.
We should just let this go.
And is that what happened? Did you have that conversation with your boss at the time?
I did, and I think everyone was just like, oh, we really want it to work, and I really wanted it to work because I had planned it so much. And they really wanted it to work because I think they liked me, and I was sort of, all right to have around. But yeah, I just knew that, you know, but it's quite weird having that conversation with yourself when I was about 23. I mean, I have to say it was like a midlife crisis. It was a conversation that normally is when people like now my age, our age, kind of go, well, I've wasted my career.
Yeah.
I sort of had that moment in a real way.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I agree.
So did you have anything to go to when you had this conversation, this sort of parting of the ways?
I really didn't, and that, you know, again, you sort of look back on the naivety or the overconfidence of youth, or just the courage, and I guess you didn't have responsibilities, and you know, I had a kind father who was super disappointed that I wanted to do it, but I just had this thing about working in television, which is sort of the opposite, you know, the opposite.
So where did this come from? Because that's such a different world. Where was the passion?
I used to watch chat shows and think, and wish I was doing the interviewing, wish I was in your seat. And I used to watch comedy, you know, when I was young, and always make notes in my head about what was wrong with it. Not that anyone was asking my opinion, I was just giving it to myself. And so I just thought, you know, and I was the funny-ish one in my class and that kind of stuff, and I just kind of used to think I had this instinct for what I thought might be funny.
Yeah. But
really beyond that, you know, working in television is about as broad as saying I want to work in IT.
Right.
You know, I want to work in
so many different flavours.
You know, so I don't really know what. But I started to write letters to people at the BBC.
Yeah.
In a very persistent manner, shall we say.
How many letters did you write?
Well, I used to write a lot of letters, and I used to get a lot of rejection letters, and that's pretty standard. But
do you remember what you said in the letters?
I mean, I just used to, you know, I would probably cringe if I would, but I would just, you know, you just sort of ask for, you know, plead for half an hour of somebody's time. But people used to ask me, well, what do you want to do? And I didn't really know. And they used to say, understandably, they used to say, well, you know, did you do like college radio? Did you used to write for your local magazine?
Right.
Did you, you know, show us some signs?
Searching for some nuggets
right.
in the past, yeah.
And I used to say, no, I read business. I was a failed stockbroker, and I don't really have any thing to bring to you except maybe too much self-belief and a willingness to work hard. And you know, what I eventually did was, you know, and anyone watching this who wants to get into TV, a good trick is you look at the credits of the shows that come up, and just, you know, and start to write to individuals.
Right.
Maybe the people.
So you were writing to directors or producers?
Producers, yeah, and not necessarily to people who are right at the top, because everyone writes to them.
Mm.
But you know, if you sort of go a little bit more, you can flatter people a little bit. Right. More easily. And I sort of always say to people now, like, if you want to write to me, don't write to me, I don't read anything. Write to the people at my company who, and, you know, and kind of go, I saw your name on this show and I really like that show, and, No, so look, I eventually did that, and after the first thing I actually ended up doing was working for BBC Business News,
Right.
Writing market reports overnight.
So some connection at least to the
Correct.
finance world.
Yeah,
that
so
makes sense.
that was my first bit of sort of connective tissue.
Yeah.
But I eventually ended up doing work experience in the factual department, and within an organisation like the BBC, once you get your foot in the door, it's about trying to stay in the ring.
Yeah, amazing opportunity, and what a progressive organisation to answer those emails. And thank you, by the way, for responding to my email.
I did respond to your email.
Do you remember how we met, by the way?
I was a few glasses of red wine down.
So was I.
At a dinner. Would that be right?
Yeah,
Is that your
right,
recollection?
Yeah. That's my recollection.
Yeah, we met.
Wonderful restaurant in East London.
In a
sort
boozy
of
dinner.
Shared table, and,
that's
and we
right.
just happened to be at the same table.
That's right. That's all
Had a
it
great
was.
chat.
We had a great chat. And now I've got 1 million shares in Google. I didn't expect the stock options from you. That was really kind. Thank you so much. It was super generous.
Well, we're very proud of our stock performance
There you
along that
go.
last. Gosh, you threw me off there.
Yeah, I did. You were like, have I?
Yeah.
No, you haven't. But you were drunk.
Yeah, you should.
You wrote it on a napkin.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
That's all right.
Still got the napkin.
It's on camera now.
Oh, shit. Okay. Very good. I'll better deliver on those options.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're at BBC and you started in business, and what led you into comedy?
Yeah, I ended up, kind of to keep the story short and manageable, I ended up working for a lady who, as a researcher, and she said to me, this is fine, but actually I can see that not only do you want to work in the comedy department, but I think you might be good at that.
Yeah.
And she essentially called the head of comedy for me, and said,
Good at that in the sense of writing or performing?
I started writing.
Yeah.
I started writing this, Time Out magazine in London. I used to write a little column in them just about nightclubs or parties that I'd been to or a day out, and I would send them to them, and they actually started to print them.
Right.
And they were kind of comedic in angle, and so she would read a few of those and said, you should. I used to write comedy sketches. Again, nobody had asked me, I would just write them. So she got me a meeting with the head of comedy at the BBC, and not only that, but in those days, I know money's much tighter everywhere these days, but the department that she ran said that they would pay my salary for 3 months for me to work in comedy, like a secondment. So the head of comedy for the BBC couldn't really say no, because I was coming free for a few months. And that was it, really. And I think from that moment on,
What a break.
It was a great break, number one. And
You're still in touch with the people?
Yeah, John Plowman, who was a super famous producer in comedy. He worked with French and Saunders, and he's done the Fast Show, and he's a really well-known guy. And what I'd say about that is it's the first time, after all that story about the city and working in bits and pieces, and it's a bit more of a painful story than I painted. It took a long time. It was the first time that I landed up doing something that I actually thought I'm good at this.
Right. And you were writing?
I was sort of junior producing and reading sketches and script editing, I think you would call it.
Okay.
But I felt for the first time at home.
Yeah.
And very at home.
Right.
And there's nothing like the moment where sort of man and machine, or your heart and your brain click with a career.
Yeah.
And it's a relief, especially after
getting out of bed in the morning and wanting to get into work.
Yeah, wanting to get into work and feeling that people wanted you to be at that work, and also kind of thinking, you really only need to be good at one thing in this world, and I think it's really worth trying to find what that thing is.
Yeah.
And going back to without sounding melancholy, going back to that kind of midlife crisis thing, you meet a lot of people, who say their biggest regret is they've spent, and life is precious, and they've spent 15, they get to my age, mid-40s, late 40s, and I'm just not doing something I love.
Yeah.
But you get so far into it and you're stuck.
All too common. A lot of people ask me what they should do, including my children actually.
Yeah.
And I say, well, that's the wrong question.
Yeah.
The question is why. Right, so search for your passion. What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
And it's so easy, as you say, just to be drawn into that So that treadmill and find yourself in your 40s thinking, where did that go?
In a flash, and then you really can't move, right? And then you really are up against younger, cheaper people, and there does come a time when, like, getting into television, there is a way of getting into television, and I think the horrible truth is that youth is quite important to that story.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between a 23-year-old running on a set and bringing cups of tea to people like me, and that being a way into an industry, and a 45-year-old doing it. There's a slight tragedy to that somehow, and it's just.
Is that true in front of the camera as well as behind the camera?
I think, look, there will always be people that come to all sorts of businesses late in life, but on the whole, my advice is have the courage to try and find that thing when you're young. Yeah. And when I say young, I mean like all of your 20s and your early 30s, but have the courage to change. Yeah. But life is life, and time is time, and you can't change it.
That's true.
And there comes a point when it's tricky to change, and kids and mortgages and all the usual bollocks of life. So I just really think that, the biggest advice I give anyone who I love and who is sort of young with their life ahead of them is find your thing. Yeah. Think about it.
Go do it.
Go do it. Don't fall into things. And if you fall into something and it doesn't feel right, fall out of it.
I think that's great advice.
Be decisive, though.
I think it's great advice actually at any age, honestly, actually. I think these days we're living longer lives, aren't we?
Yeah.
The world is changing so quickly, and you've just got to continuously ask yourself that question. If it's not comfortable, try and change it, right? Yeah. What have you got to lose?
Right.
Perhaps riskier and harder when you get older, but just as valuable, perhaps more so.
Right.
So what a wonderful progressive start to your career. You found your niche in comedy, and then you really, basically boarded your own rocket ship and took off, right? So tell me about how you met Ricky, and how did The Office come about?
Yeah, I mean, once you get into the world of TV and comedy or any kind of thing, there is no real career path. Like, it's the opposite of an accountant who has to, or my family are all doctors who exam, 4 years training, another exam, move up the ladder. You can move quickly or not move at all in lots of creative industries. And quite early on I met Stephen Merchant, who was sort of a trainee with me in that comedy department in my early jobs.
He was a writer as well.
He was a writer, and he was more interested in writing, I was more interested in producing. And he had a friend called Ricky Gervais who was working at a radio station called XFM in those days, and towards the end of Stephen's sort of traineeship, the BBC said to him, well, to finish off you get X amount of money, it's not very much money, make a 10-minute film. Can be about anything you want. And he made it of his friend Ricky Gervais, who was beginning a character who was then called Sleazy Boss.
Right.
So sign of different times. And really it was quite a one-note, very sort of, it was that kind of classic lower middle management thing that David Brent became.
Yeah.
But it was quite narrow in its focus, and it was much more, him sort of slightly. There's a scene in the beginning of The Office where he's sort of interviewing a lady and he's sort of being a little bit lascivious, and it was a bit more of that. And from then, I saw that and just fell in love with it. And I'd worked in a few offices in my time, but I had a very I've always had a very acute sense and kind of a love of the mundane, of the mundanity of life, of like, we all do these certain things, these patterns, the people who, I made a show about people in supermarkets. I like the mundane, I like the everyday, and the melancholy really of, I guess, what I've just been saying, people going to work every Monday morning and it not being what they love, and then making a product that they don't care about, and then having a boss who they would not wish to spend time with.
Right.
And living for the weekends, and that's what The Office became.
So it's a comic satire in a way, that's a commentary on life. And
yeah, it's very much a satire of, the character of Tim in The Office, is the classic anti-hero, the man who's thrown away his life, who should have been doing something else. And Dawn, and all of, Ricky, Stephen and I started to talk about, there are so many different types that are actually archetypes. I'm sure they exist within this organisation.
Caricatures.
The salesman, the receptionist, you know, the military nut who was Gareth, you know, and so on and so forth, and just the people zombie-like getting through their day in under strict lighting and tiled ceilings.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's really what the office became, and I think that's why it connected with people.
Well, that, and I mean, I'm a huge fan of actually everything that you've done, including the office, and there was nothing like it at the time. Right? You were not following any trend.
Yeah, we were not. No, and I think that's also to do with youth, because you know we all get set in our ways, and it's a real, like, you know, now that I'm a little bit older, it's really important to kind of reset your brain, and nobody was doing how we did it in the office. People thought it was a real documentary. We kind of threw away the conventions of making television, the lighting, the big sets, the kind of the formality of it.
Right.
And the whole idea of it was that it felt a very fluid process, so that those actors could be as naturalistic. You know, we would film rather, actors at their desk, like stretching, eating an apple, and like just doodling a bit on their hand, and we would shoot that. We also filmed a photocopier just repetitively photocopying.
So talk me through your. So you were the producer, and so for those who aren't in the industry, explain what a day in the life or a week in the life of a producer looks like in that context.
I think the producer in television is much more central to the process than perhaps a producer in film. I think film is a director's medium, but a producer is responsible for sort of casting it alongside the director. I mean, I guess you have overall responsibility. There's a very creative aspect to producing, which is you work on the scripts with the writers and you cast it, and then there's being across the sort of the back end of it and the organisation of it. And television is incredibly logistical. You know, you've got a lot of people to be in one place, highly drilled, ready to go at 7:45 a.m. every morning. And you know, there's a real sort of sergeant major aspect to making that run. There's budgets, schedules, and you've got to deal with relationships with channels. Because you've got to manage expectations. And one great thing about The Office, actually, just coming back to it, was there really was very little expectation on it. You know, we were really not watched that heavily.
Bit of a roll of the dice.
Sort of roll of the dice. We were low budget, we were new, and you know, fair play to the BBC for giving us that chance. But it wasn't like, you know, oh, we've got big stars here, we've put a lot of, you know, the marketing spend is going to be billboards all over London. You know, it wasn't that. It was the opposite.
So it must have been shocking when it absolutely took off.
Well, it was slow. It was a slow, well, it was, I say it was slow, it was both slow and very fast. We certainly arrived with sort of zero fanfare. But I, you know, really clearly remember it just not going away in people's minds, and people talking to me about it more and more. The BBC rather cleverly repeated it. It went out over the summer, and then they repeated it just around BAFTA nomination time. So when people were sitting down to think about what to nominate for a BAFTA, we were on air at that moment. And I think by then people knew it was scripted, because I think people thought it was real. And, you know, Gervais's sort of centrally brilliant and unequivocally brilliant performance in the middle was starting to get notices, and it was starting to resonate. So that was, and then we did win the first BAFTA and award.
I think it's the first time I saw you. You were on stage accepting a...
We were one on stage, and then the truth is we didn't stop winning for a few years.
How many did you get from you?
Well, that show got 3 BAFTAs, and then it won a Golden Globe in American, and we did the American version of The Office as well. So it sort of became this thing, and at that point it kind of moved quickly. And you know what? It was the first thing we'd all done, so we didn't know.
Unbelievable.
I probably should have stopped my career just then.
Out of interest, did you actually film it in Slough? Because that's where it's set, right?
No, we didn't. We shot the title sequence and that roundabout. The blue building that comes up at the beginning in our title sequence is shot in Slough is now demolished. We filmed it at Teddington Studios in West London, but strangely, in office space at Teddington Studios.
Okay,
so we weren't in a studio, so weirdly it could have been any old office, but they had this wing that they were where they used to do their admin. I think they were about to knock it down.
Yeah.
And we said it'd be great to be near a studio for all the equipment, but so that's where we shot it. Also been knocked down.
Well, for those who don't live in London that might be watching or listening, Slough is sort of on the outskirts west of London. It's a bit of an industrial area. It's also got some very nice parts of it, and it's sort of a leafy countryside as well if you get out of it, but it's sort of ironically industrial and wonderful.
Yeah. I think that the point with it is it's Anywheresville. That's the point, right?
Exactly, exactly that. Anywheresville. Now, what I love about this, I mean, most normal people would think, wow, that's my life's work, but you've just built on that and gone on to bigger and better things ever since, and some of the work since then is, I think, even more remarkable and innovative and funny in a way. The IT crowd, cuckoo, people just do nothing, stack, let's, flats.
Stack, let's, flats.
Talk to me about, that's your latest, right?
Yeah.
And we'll come back to people just do nothing,
sure.
Because you're doing a film on that.
Yeah.
Staff Let's Flats. What's that about? Where did that come from?
Yeah, Staff Let's Flats it's written by this guy called Jamie Dimitri, and he is Cypriot, and I'm Egyptian by birth. And we were sort of talking about being second generation in his country, and he just sort of talks about his father and that kind of lettings agency, those kind of people, the very opposite of Foxtons, these kind of crappy high street, they take you to see a flat and you're like, do you even have the keys to this flat? And you go in and there's like no walls, and he's sort of, we were just talking about that kind of world, and lots of people kind of, especially in big expensive cities like London, are very frustrated with the property here and spend their lives paying through the nose for these less than desirable. So it felt like it had a resonance to me. And again, look, he's a brilliant performer, and we sort of did this thing. It's kind of office based again, and it was just nice to bring those types up to date,
making fun of the mundane and ordinary
again. But Jamie, it's kind of built around the central performance, and I love the second generation thing as well. It speaks to me. Yeah.
And then People Just Do Nothing. If you haven't seen it, find it somewhere and look at it.
Well, it started on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely brilliant, and it is just, again, innovation in comedy. Talk to me about that and your latest project.
Yeah, well, People Just Do Nothing is used along as a sort of a model of, like, they started putting clips up on their own on YouTube. I saw it, I thought it was very funny. It's set in a pirate radio station, again, slightly underrepresented group of world, again, the sort of the mundanity, I'm sort of drawn to the same themes time and time again.
Set in
Brentford, guys whose ambition far outstrips their talent. And again, a brilliant bunch of performers, and we started working on it, and it's had a similar trajectory, I guess, to The Office. It started slowly, it started to pick up fans, it's got some awards buzz, it went on and won a BAFTA. The guys have become famous and rich, they don't return my phone calls anymore. It's like, and it's been a really happy sort of thing. I love helping make stars.
Right.
Working with famous people is a pain in the ass because they are, but helping people become famous is a pleasure.
Right.
And it's lovely to go on that kind of journey together.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of People Just Do Nothing, and it got all the way to, we did 5 seasons on the BBC.
Yeah.
And we started getting interest from film companies.
I think I've seen all of them.
Have you? Great.
And film, so tell me about the latest project.
Yeah, well, we have just shot a film in Tokyo. People Just Do Nothing, big in Japan, I think we might call it, or something more original. But yeah, we've shot it, it's being edited, it's being co-financed by people in this building. Universal Focus Features, who are based here alongside Google. We will see how that goes. It's got a cinema release, we think, this autumn.
Yep.
We're editing it now. There's lots of work to do, but it feels funny. And I'm just immensely proud that, you know, this show has gone from sort of 3-minute clips on YouTube, sort of 5 seasons on the BBC, award stages, and now a movie. So that's, you know, the whole, you know, east to west of a show's trajectory, and that's been great to be a part of.
Well, amazing segue into and good illustration of how these things can develop from YouTube clips up into a feature film. How have you found the TV and film industry change over the time that you've been in it?
It's changing enormously, and it's not changing. So I think the way in which we consume television is changing, and you don't need me to run through, you know, video on demand and Netflix and Amazon and Apple and you guys and everything, people watching on their phones, etc. Non-linear watching, who sits down and, you know, who sits down and looks at a newspaper for what's on tonight anymore? I mean, when's the last time you did that? Mm-hmm. Certainly our kids will have never done that. Mm-hmm. So that's all changing. Once you switch on to Netflix, the BBC, Amazon, whoever, you've got to watch a TV program, and that making that TV program is the same as it's ever been. You know, you want to have a hit, you want to engage people. The way we make television is pretty similar. The cameras have got smaller, mm-hmm. but
mine's pretty small.
Yours is really small. For anyone
smartphone.
For anyone watching this, the equipment is extremely cheap.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you for pointing that out.
Please send money, and they didn't know that.
Donate. Link below. No,
very cheap. Some sort of Kickstarter. But you know that the cameras have got smaller, but unfortunately we still need actors. We still need writers.
Yep.
They're not robots. They are. You know, it's absolutely a people person game. I think maybe TV shows are a bit more internationally focused. Everyone wants a hit that can play abroad.
Yeah. These
days, the world shrunk. You know, we now watch HBO shows. We watch, you know, Amazon is one platform internationally. So it's less that there are less shows for individual markets, especially in England as an English-speaking country. Obviously, so the craft of what I do is kind of the same as when I began my, you know, sit down with a talented writer,
right,
come up with good stories, compelling real-life stories, brilliant actors to bring it to life, smart people behind the camera. That just hasn't changed.
Right.
Strangely.
Different at the point of consumption and the number of canvases, I guess, you have to work with.
Right, but what we deliver remains the same.
Yeah.
And it actually, you know, so it's when people ask me that question, like, TV, you know, the TV industry is changing very rapidly. It is, and yet when I go to work and sit behind my desk, I do the same thing as I did when I was in my mid-20s.
It is and it isn't.
It is and it isn't.
So there's probably some people watching who are thinking about getting into TV or film, or maybe some people wanting to pivot in that direction as phase 2 or 3 or subsequent phases. What advice would you give them, Ash?
You know, it's you kind of need to be under somebody's wing. You know, there's just a truth to this. The industry is trying to change a lot, but it's really about personal contacts, mm-hmm. and you have to find those personal contacts. You've got a lot of people to shoot at and to aim at. You know, there are any number of production companies like mine. There are any number of producers, film companies. You know, there's a lot of people trying to get into it. Mm-hmm. The most common way to this day remains work experience.
Just try and get a foot in the door.
Just trying to get a foot in the door. You know, it's not fair, because why should people be able to afford to work for free? Yeah. And I think our industry is trying to stop that as well.
Yeah.
You know, and they're aware that self-selects a certain kind of person, which isn't right either. But whatever the mechanics of that is, getting in at the bottom, formal qualifications, less important.
Less important, right.
Bring your personality, if it's a good one.
Yeah. And maybe experiment and gather a little, you know, college radio or whatever you were asked about.
Honestly, there is nothing stopping, you know, these days, as you will know from your user-generated content, and people just do nothing began it. There is nothing, anyone watching this who thinks they have something, a funny character. You don't need my permission or my know-how nor my equipment to help you make that at least a taster tape, right? At least something to show.
Yeah.
You may not have the budget to get it on TV or that know-how, and that's where sort of inverted commas professionals like me can help. But people can at least demonstrate what it is they want to do, you know, more so than ever.
Yeah.